This is the Ethanol Report, the industry podcast from the Renewable Fuels Association since 2008. I'm Cindy Zimmerman.
Well, the wheels seem to be starting to fall off the federal government's push to mandate electric vehicles. Ethanol producers, farmer organizations, auto dealers, truckers, and the oil industry have all filed lawsuits this month against the Environmental Protection Agency's recently finalized vehicle emission standards that amount to an EV mandate. One of those lawsuits was filed by the Renewable Fuels Association and the National Farmers Union. I'm talking with RFA President and CEO Jeff Cooper today. So, Jeff, tell us about this lawsuit.
Yeah, so we did, with the National Farmers Union, file a lawsuit against EPA over the light-duty tailpipe emission standards for 2027 through 2032. And really, it shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody, at least of all EPA, that we are challenging this regulation in court. We have, for the last couple of years, been expressing our frustration and concern to the agency around the way they are implementing this program. And I'll get to the reasons for that in a moment. So, unfortunately, they sort of ignored our concerns and all the comments we filed, and we've been to hearings and submitted lots of written comments and other information, and they didn't really pay much attention to what we had to say. So now we're going to be asking the courts to take a look at this regulation. And really the big concern boils down to the fact that EPA is using these tailpipe standards to essentially mandate the production of electric vehicles and phase out the production of liquid-fueled vehicles that run on gasoline and ethanol and other liquid fuels. And really, the whole thing is based on this false premise that battery electric vehicles have zero emissions. What EPA has done with these standards is they have set very stringent, hard to meet tailpipe emission standards that today's internal combustion engine vehicles simply cannot meet. And it's going to be really hard for automakers to meet those standards with traditional vehicles moving forward. And so what EPA does is they give EVs a zero emissions number. And that assumption really leads or really forces automakers to dramatically increase their production of EVs to meet these standards that can't be met any other way moving forward. So we have a huge problem with that, obviously, as producers of low carbon liquid fuels. And so we're challenging that regulation in the DC Circuit Court of Appeals. And really, the other issue here, Cindy, is EPA, and we said this, I think we sort of led off our press release with this. EPA really doesn't have the authority. Congress never authorized EPA to finalize this sort of regulation that allocates the vehicle market and basically dictates what sorts of vehicles must be produced. If Congress wanted to mandate electric vehicles, they would have done that. They would have passed a law that does that. But there is no law anywhere on the books that provides this sort of authority to EPA to do what they did with this regulation. And that's why we're taking them to court.
Now, how does RFA and NFU's lawsuit differ from the one that was put forth by corn growers, Farm Bureau, auto dealers, and API?
Yeah, so that suit is being led by the American Petroleum Institute, and they've got a lot of the same concerns that we do, and a lot of the same issues, and especially when it comes to congressional authority and this what's called the major questions doctrine. And again, that relates to, hey, something this big, something this important that has this sort of impact on the U.S. economy. This is Congress's role. This is not the role of an agency to be creating administrative law to dictate these sorts of things. That's we think that's really going to be the focus of that suit that's being led by API. And again, we agree with that. We'll certainly have some references to that in our statement of issues. But we also sort of doubt that API is going to be spending as much time or attention on some of the issues that are unique to ethanol producers and unique to farmers in this regulation. And again, from where we stand, we could be meeting these standards or exceeding these standards if EPA was doing a better job or doing any job of allowing low carbon liquid fuels like ethanol and other renewable fuels to play a role here. What EPA does is they focus only on the tailpipe part of the greenhouse gas emissions life cycle. They ignore all of the upstream emissions associated with producing electricity, which, 60% still comes from fossil fuels here in the U.S. today. And so we've been saying, look, if EPA did this the right way and looked at the full life cycle and the big picture of all the emissions related to producing and using different fuels in different sorts of vehicles, renewable fuels would stand up very well and would stack up and compete very effectively against electricity. And so those are the sorts of arguments that we're going to be making. And we believe those are going to be a bit different and a bit nuanced from what we expect to see in the API statement of issues and kind of the approach that they're taking. Again, we have similar interests, similar concerns here, but we wanted to make sure that the ethanol industry, our member producers and the farmers that supply us, have the ability to put forth arguments to the court that are really focused on the unique and specific issues that really affect our industries in this regulation from EPA.
Well, besides that, RFA is doing more than just taking legal action when it comes to helping find a better way to clean the air without mandating the use of electric vehicles. You're actually proving it in the real world with your very own plug-in electric hybrid flex fuel vehicle and a new study that you released at the Fuel Ethanol Conference this month. Tell us about that.
Our Ford Escape project is very much related to the issues raised in this lawsuit and this whole debate around how best to reduce emissions from light-duty transportation. And again, we don't have anything against electric vehicles. If somebody wants to go out and buy a Tesla, great. They should be able to do that. They should have that ability and have the flexibility and have the option to do that. What we have a problem with is when EPA and other agencies start to dictate that consumers really must purchase a Tesla or automakers really must produce electric vehicles in order to reduce emissions from the transportation sector. We've been saying for years there are other ways to reduce emissions from transportation, and certainly biofuels like ethanol are one of the best, lowest cost, most available ways of doing that in the near term. And all we're asking for is a level playing field, fair carbon accounting that again looks at the full scope of emissions impacts and puts us on an even footing when it comes to competing for the market. So that's our interest. That's what really led us to undertake this project with the Ford Escape, where we bought up a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle that's got an 11-gallon liquid fuel tank on it, and said, what if that fuel tank was full of low carbon E85, and what if that vehicle pairs that low carbon fuel with hopefully low carbon electricity that would run the electric motor in the vehicle, and what would the impact of that be? And so for the last 14 or 15 months, we've been conducting a study on that vehicle. We've accumulated nearly 34,000 real-world driving miles. We've done emissions testing at the University of California, Riverside. We've had life cycle analysis on the greenhouse gas impacts done by a couple of experts in that field. And all of this work we sort of gathered up together into one report and released it at the Fuel Ethanol Workshop. And what it shows is, hey, this sort of technology, a plug-in hybrid electric flex fuel vehicle, can deliver superior environmental performance, lower greenhouse gas emissions, lower emissions of tailpipe pollutants like particulate matter and NOx and other things that lead to smog and ozone formation. That technology can really combine the best of both worlds into one platform without sacrificing consumer convenience and flexibility and optionality, and without having the same concerns around where am I going to recharge this thing? If there's not a charging station nearby, guess what? You can fill up the fuel tank with any liquid fuel containing any amount of ethanol from 0 all the way up to 85%. So really, we looked at this as hey, can we prove that this technology would do the trick? It would lower emissions to the same or greater extent as a battery electric vehicle. It would cost less, and it would provide more options for consumers. And everything we've learned from this project is absolutely this would be the way to go in terms of our future transportation needs.
So, what can you do with that information? Who would listen to you if you tell them that this is, I mean, it just seems like a perfect go-between. If you want to get to pure electric vehicles, well, this is a good way to move in that direction rather than going from combustion engines to electric vehicles.
Yeah.
What's your next move with this? How can you get the government to listen to you?
Well, now that we've got all the data and analysis and the study is essentially complete, we are taking those results and that information to the government agencies that have a role to play here, and that's of course EPA primarily, but also the Department of Energy and USDA and others in the administration to show them that this is a better way. And all we're again asking for is, when it comes to these regulations, provide a level playing field when it comes to incentivizing creative solutions and different approaches for reducing emissions. Right now, there is no incentive in these tailpipe regulations for flex fuel vehicles. No way of encouraging automakers to increase the production of FFVs that can run on low carbon biofuels. So again, we're just saying, the proof is in the pudding. We have these real world results. Let's think about how to better encourage automakers to look at the full range of options out there for reducing emissions. And again, also recognizing that consumers have a say here, right? The consumer is still the king in this thing. And just because automakers are being forced to make electric vehicles doesn't necessarily mean that there are going to be buyers clamoring for these things at the dealerships. And that's certainly what we've seen in the last 6 months or so, is a real downturn in consumer enthusiasm for battery electric vehicles.
Well, the other cool thing about your vehicle is that RFA converted that hybrid to run on E85, and you actually demonstrated how easy it is to convert a regular vehicle to a flex fuel vehicle right on the trade show floor at FEW, right?
We did it. So what we actually converted was a brand new Polaris Ranger ATV. And so, again, part of the purpose of that is showing how easy it is to convert really any internal combustion engine over to flex fuel capability. We had a technician there that was able to convert that engine to flex fuel within about 20 minutes. In fact, the hardest part of the conversion was getting the bed removed from the vehicle so they could have easier access to the engine. But once that was done, the conversion was over in the matter of about 20 minutes. That same conversion can be done to virtually every internal combustion engine out there on the road today. There are aftermarket kits available for a couple $100, $500, $600, $700, that can make any vehicle on the road capable of operating on flex fuels like E85. So again, that's one area where we're interacting with EPA, because the certification of those kits, those conversion kits, has not been easy, and not every vehicle is technically certified for those conversions. But that's another thing we're working on, and again, another option we want to provide to consumers who are interested in lower cost and lower carbon fuels.
Well, what's really important about that is that car manufacturers are not making flex fuel vehicles anymore. So people, if they want to be able to use E85, would have to convert it themselves. And that's really important in markets like California, where there's a huge demand for flex fuel vehicles, right?
That's right. And that's one reason that the conversion kits are really growing in popularity, is it's getting harder and harder for people who want a flex fuel vehicle to go to a dealership and find one, especially if you're talking about new vehicles. There are very few new vehicles offered today that have flex fuel capability from the manufacturer. In fact, this year, there may not be any in model year 24. Really, the last one last year in 2023 was the Ford F-150. This year's model of the F-150 does not offer that capability. But fortunately, we're actually seeing General Motors bringing back some FFV models, but not until model year 2025. And they've got 3 new vehicle models that will be flex fuel capable. And the reason for this, and you might remember, 8 or 10 years ago, roughly one quarter, almost 25% of what the U.S. automakers were producing had flex fuel capability. That has fallen dramatically. Autos have stopped making those vehicles. And again, it all has to do with the regulatory incentives and signals that they're getting from EPA and the Department of Transportation. The regulations that really govern auto manufacturing today discourage them from making flex fuel vehicles. And that's why we've seen such a dramatic drop off in the last several years. And that's why, again, consumers who go to a dealership and say, hey, I want an FFV, and the dealer tells them, well, we don't have any, they're not going to take no for an answer. They're going to look for some other way. And that's where these conversion kits have come in really handy. And we're seeing some real growing popularity for those kits.
And so by using that conversion kit, then you can also convert a hybrid gasoline-powered vehicle into a hybrid flex fuel vehicle then.
You absolutely can. We've seen some gasoline hybrid vehicles converted to flex fuel capability using these kits. And then we also, obviously showed that you can do it with a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle like the Escape. And in fact, there's kind of a serial number 2 Ford Escape flex fuel plug-in hybrid, just like ours, that was converted by one of our member companies, Western New York Energy, because they really liked what we were doing with ours. And we've talked to a lot of folks that want to do the same thing. So we're going to be working with some of our members and other companies to show them what we did. And again, it's a very simple process, and hopefully get more of these things out there.
If you want to find out more about RFA's Flex Fuel Plug-in Hybrid Electric Vehicle Initiative, you can go to their website, ethanolrfa.org. Look under Events and Initiatives and go to Flex Fuel EV. That's the Ethanol Report for this time. Thanks for listening.